volume asthma to listen to while sleeping with calm, soothing sounds. For sleep relaxation tingles, medium volume relaxing massage asthma. For sleep medium volume sleep sounds for deep sleep asthma. High volume asthma sleep relaxation and medium volume asthma sounds to help you sleep. You are listening to ASMR 404Found. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I still remember the first time I saw the sign for Ravenbrook Trailhead. Tucked at the edge of an old state forest in northern Pennsylvania, its wooden planks cracked. From years of rain and snow, its lettering faint but still carved deep enough to read the name, and below it in chipped paint was a smaller board that warned hikers to remain on the main trail because side paths were unmarked and unsafe. Something about the way that warning looked felt less like advice and more like a dread, one that stirred in my chest and settled heavy in my gut because the trees beyond the sign stood too still to shadow, even though it was mid. He had driven out there with two friends, Jason and Mark, both of them outdoorsy types who thought a weekend hike would be the perfect escape from work stress and city noise. But I never liked the quiet of forest because silence as weighted presses against your ears and fills your mind with the sound of your own heartbeat in Ravenbrook. That silence more than any place I had ever been, even before we left the gravel lot. I felt the heaviness pushing against me like the woods were daring me to step inside. The longer I stared, the more I swore I could see faint shapes between pines-like figures that vanished the moment I blinked. Keachison laughed at me. When I hesitated, he said, "Come on, man, you're acting like a kid at a haunted house." But his voice cracked a little even if he smiled, and Mark kept checking the trail. Map nailed beside the sign, though the paper was yellowed, and the ink smudged like water had bled through it, and half the paths were missing from the diagram, leaving only the main trail clearly drawn, winding deep into the hills, then stopping abruptly at a point marked with a black XW. He strapped on our packs and stepped onto the dirt path. Crunch of leaves and gravel beneath our boots sharpened the stillness. Right away I noticed how the air shifted colder than a lot behind us, damp with the smell of moss and rot, and as the trees closed in overhead, their branches were upon so tight they strangled the sunlight into faint green ribbons across the ground. The air grew heavy enough to make breathing feel thick like swallowing smoke hay. Tried to brush it off, told myself it was just nerves, but the deeper we went, the more wrong things felt. The birds that should have been chirping in the trees were absent. Not one squirrel rustled leaves, no insects buzzed, only our footsteps echoed again and again, and sometimes when I paused I swore I could hear another step behind us, faint, not of rhythm with our own, but every time I spun around there was nothing, only the trail stretching back into shadows. Mark pointed out odd carvings on some of the tree trunks, not initials or hearts like lovers would leave, but strange shapes etched deep with something sharp, symbols that twisted like spirals, meeting jagged edges and slashes, and the bark around them was darker than the rest, almost blackened as if the wood itself had bled sap that hardened into crust. He said maybe it was kids messing around or some old logging mark, but his voice was thin, and he avoided touching the groove as pushed further, ignoring the way the trail narrowed until branches clawed at our sleeves and the earth grew soft. like it wanted to pull us down with each step, and somewhere ahead a sound stirred. Not the call of an animal, but a low hum vibrating through the soil and up into our boots, and Jason muttered, "What the hell is that?" But no one answered because none of us wanted to admit. It felt almost like chanting muffled by dirt and stone. Deeper we went, the more we felt the forest shift around us, trees leaning subtly toward the trail, their trunks bent as though they watched from above, their roots twisting up like skeletal fingers, breaking through the soil, and there were shapes among the leaves, faces carved in knots of wood, hollow eyes staring, mouths gaping, though I told myself it was pareidolia, just tricks of the mind. But the longer I looked, the more I swore some of those wooden mouths moved faintly, like whispering words I could almost hear. But not quitted. Then the trail opened briefly to a clearing ringed with stones, blackened and scorched as though someone had built fires there again and again. But each stone bore marks cut deep, not random, not careless, each one carved with the same spirals and slashes as the trees around them, and in the center was a hole, dug into the ground wide enough for a man to climb down, though it was filled not with dirt, but with a darkness thicker than shadow, a darkness that seemed to breathe, rising and falling in slow rhythm. Jason muttered that it must be an old mine shaft, maybe boarded up once and collapsed, but no boards were there, and the air that rose from it carried a stench like iron and decay, and something sweet that made bile rise in my throat. We did not linger long. We hurried past, though I noticed the trees beyond that hole grew darker, their bark stained, their leaves brittle and curling as though the soil itself poisoned them. Mark said we should head back, maybe find another trail, but Jason laughed, said we had come too far to turn back before seeing the path ended, and he started ahead with long strides as though the forest could not touch him. Though I saw the way his shoulders tensed and his head flicked side to side at the faint rustles that stirred just beyond sight. Followed, though unease pressed heavier with every step, the hum beneath our feet growing louder, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. And when I glanced back at the clearing, I swore the stones around that pit had shifted slightly inward, as though inching closer to cover the whole of it. Was when I first felt eyes on me, not the vague sense of being watched, but a sharp, piercing gaze that burned between my shoulder blades. I turned quick, scanning the trees, and there in the distance beyond the trunk stood a figure, tall and thin, its skin pale, almost gray, blending with the birch bark. It had no face, no features, only smooth flesh where eyes and mouth should be. But it tilted its head like it was studying me, and when I blinked it was gone, leaving only branches swaying, though no wind stirred. He froze, told the others what I had seen. But Jason mocked me, said I was spooking myself, though his laugh was too tight. And Mark refused to look back, muttering that we should just keep moving, keep going, and as much as I wanted to turn around, run back to the car, the forest seemed to close behind us, trees leaning together tighter than before, the path we had walked narrowing until I doubted we could squeeze through without crawling, so we pressed on. And the trail wound deeper, darker, the hum now a pulse that matched my racing heart. And every shadow looked to dense, every branch too crooked, and the silence pressed so heavy it roared in my ears, until at last the trail bent down into a gully where the soil was black and damp, and on the far side we saw another sign half buried in moss. Its wood cracked, its paint peeled, but still clear enough to read 3 words. Burned deep into the board, turn back. sign with those words carved into the wood stood crooked in the gully, like it had been waiting for us, roots curling around its base, moss draped across the edges. But the letters themselves cut clean and deep as though someone had carved them yesterday, and the longer I stared, the more it felt like the letters pulsed faintly with a glow too weak to be light, too subtle to be certain, but strong enough to make my stomach twist. Jason laughed. It off again, called it a prank by local kids who wanted to scare off hikers, but his laugh cracked in the middle and his eyes lingered on the sign longer than he meant to. Mark muttered that we should listen, turn around, and head back before the woods swallowed us, but Jason kept pushing forward, his boots sinking into the damp soil of the gully, leaving prints that filled slowly with dark water that smelled like rust and rot. And when I followed reluctantly, noticed something moving in that water, tiny ripples, though no stone had dropped, no insect had touched the surface. And when I leaned closer, I saw shapes writhing just beneath the black layer, then pale worms twisting together like veins, spreading across skin. Gully itself was a hollow that seemed carved not by rain or water, but by hands that scooped earth away. The walls steep, the dirt packed hard, and places carved with those same spirals we had seen before, spirals that went deeper, tighter, as though boring into the soil itself. And when I brushed one lightly with my fingertips, the dirt crumbled softer than ash, releasing a smell sharp and sweet like rotting fruit mixed with blood. And I jerked my hand away, wiping it on my jeans, while Jason shouted at us to quit dawdling, climbed the far side, and the trail narrowed into a tunnel of trees, their branches woven so close overhead. The air turned dim like twilight, though it was only midday. The trunks here bent at strange angles, leaning inward until their tops almost touched, forming an archway that stretched ahead in a crooked line. And as we stepped beneath it, the silence grew total. Just the absence of birds, but the absence of our own sound, footsteps landing without echo, breath drawn without noise. Even the rustle of our packs vanished until it felt like our bodies had been swallowed into a void where sound could not live. Mark whispered, asking if we heard it too, but no sound left his mouth, only the shape of words forming on his lips and his wide eyes, and the panic that rose in his chest. He grabbed my arm, shaking his head, while Jason pushed on, as if determined not to acknowledge what was happening. And the further we followed, the more the silence pressed until it hurt like pressure in the ears on an airplane, and I wanted to scream just to break it, but my throat locked tight, and no sound came then after what felt like hours. Though time seemed wrong in that place, we stepped out of the tunnel of branches into another clearing, this one ringed not with stones but with wooden stakes driven into the ground at uneven angles, each stake carved with spirals and slashes, their tips blackened as though burned, but not by fire. Something else had eaten the wood, leaving the surface bubbled and blistered and strung between the stakes were cords of sinew stretched taut and glistening wet, as though freshly cut. The cords formed a web across the clearing, leaving only narrow paths between them. Jason muttered, finally breaking the silence, his voice thin and cracked, that it must be some old hunter's setup, maybe for drying hides, but we all knew it was nothing like that, because the sinew cords still dripped dark fluid onto the soil, and flies should have swarmed. But none came, and the smell that rose was thick, coppery, like meat left in the sun yet sweet enough to sting my teeth wedged through the narrow gaps. Careful not to touch the chords, though more than once I felt them sway, as though something unseen plucked them like strings of a vast instrument, and each vibration hung low in my chest, rattling my ribs. Mark begged to turn back, his voice trembling. But Jason pressed on faster and faster until we nearly jogged across the clearing. Into the trees beyond the trail dropped again, this time steeper, a slope of stone slick with moss and dampness, and we descended slowly, clinging to roots as handholds, until at the bottom we found the ruins of something old, maybe a cabin, maybe a chapel, though no roof. Remained only walls of stone half crumbled, and the air inside smelled of soot and mold, but beneath that was another smell, thick and cloying like perfume made from spoiled flowers inside the ruin. The ground was marked with circles etched deep into the stone floor, not painted, not carved, but worn as though countless feet had traced the shapes until the rock itself gave way. The circles overlapped, tangled like chains, and in the very center was a pit, shallow, but wide, filled with water, black and still. But when I leaned closer, I saw faces shifting beneath the surface, faint outlines of eyes. Mouths pressed against the water from below, as though bodies floated just under the skin of it. But when I blinked, the faces vanished, leaving only ripples spreading outward, though no stone had fallen. Mark refused to step closer. He clung to the wall, muttering prayers. Under his breath, his voice shaking, Jason crouched near the pit, reaching a hand toward the water, though I shouted not to touch it, and for once he froze his hand, trembling inches from the surface, his face pale, eyes glassy like something deep in the water, stared back at him, pulling him, and he jerked suddenly as if waking from a dream, and stumbled back, breathing hard. That was when the chanting returned louder than before, though muffled still, as though it rose from beneath the earth. The same low hum vibrating in our chests, shaking dust from the stones of the ruin. And this time words seemed to form just at the edge of hearing, not English, not anything. Human syllables that twisted in my ears until my head throbbed and I clutched it tight. Fighting the urge to scream, Jason shouted that we needed to keep moving. Needed to find where the trail ended. Maybe that would explain everything, but Mark broke. Then shaking his head, sobbing, he said he was done, he was leaving, he did not care. If the forest twisted closed behind us, he would crawl through the roots, claw through the soil, if he had to, but he was not taking another step forward, and before we could stop him, he ran back up the slope, disappearing into the trees. Jason cursed, but did not chase him. He turned to me, eyes wide, not with anger, but with fear. Though he tried to hide it, said we had to keep going together, that the trail had answers. If we stopped, we would be trapped here forever, and though my gut screamed to follow Mark, to claw through the forest myself, something in the chanting, something in the spirals, something in the faces beneath the water pit pulled me forward like invisible hands wrapping around my ribs, dragging me deeper into the wood sand. So I followed Jason, leaving Mark behind in that twisting forest, knowing if I would ever see him again. Jason pushed ahead fast, almost too fast, like something pulled him. I stumbled behind, fighting the heaviness in the air, because every step seemed to drag me down. Like the earth itself wanted me swallowed, the trail sloped deeper into the woods. Twisting tight of the trees, leaning so close their branches scraped against our shoulders. and the chanting kept rising, not louder exactly, but closer, as though the voices circled just beyond sight, shifting with every turn. He kept glancing back, hoping to see Mark come running after us, but the forest behind was darker than before, no sign of him. Not even the echo of his footsteps, and the guilt burned heavy in my chest, though fear pressed heavier still. And when Jason stopped suddenly, holding up a hand, I nearly ran into him. He pointed to the ground ahead where the trail split into two paths. Though neither looked natural, one path sank down into a trench, its soil wet and black, lined with bones half buried, jutting up like roots to pale too long, while the other path climbed slightly toward a ridge where trees bent into archways, their branches carved with hundreds of spirals, each one dripping sap so dark it looked like torches. And muttered, "Which way do we go?" his voice rough, dry, like he had been swallowing ash. I could not answer because both paths looked cursed. The trench below breathing with a faint mist rising from it, the ridge above whispering. The faint voices, not wind, not leaves, but voices soft and beckoning, repeating words I could not understand, but that stirred the back of my skull like claws scratching inside. Bonageson said, "Screw it," and started toward the ridge, pushing through the archway of dripping branches, and I followed, though each drop of sap that fell onto the soil hissed faintly as if burning holes into the ground. The smell rising sharp, metallic, like blood boiled with smoke. And the moment we passed beneath that arch, my chest tightened, lungs fighting for air, and I felt something press against my skin like dozens of hands brushing my arms, my neck, my face. But when I swiped, nothing was there, only shadow swaying between the trees. The ridge narrowed into a spine of stone, the path slick with moss that dropped steep on either side, though I could not see the bottom because a fog rolled thick, hiding whatever lay below. The mist glowed faintly with pale light, shifting in swirls that looked almost like shapes writhing just out of reach. Jason muttered, "Keep your eyes on the trail, do not look down," but his own gaze flicked constantly toward that mist, his face pale, slick with sweat halfway across. We heard it, the sound of something moving in the fog below, not footsteps, not the rustle of animals, but something vast, shifting, heavy, dragging like chains pulled across stone. The fog swirled, thickened, and a shape rose beneath it, tall, so tall it blotted out what little sky we could see, its form unclear, shifting. But eyes, dozens, maybe hundreds of eyes, blinked open, glowing faint, white, staring up at us in unison, and mouths open too wide, too many each one, breathing out the chant we had heard since the gully. Only now louder, clearer words pounding in rhythm, though still foreign and twisted, and each mouth stretched wider until their jaws crackety froze, gripping the stone ridge so hard my nails bled, while Jason grabbed my arm, pulling me forward, shouting we had to move now before it reached us. As we stumbled across the ridge, the fog boiled, rising higher, eyes, mouths following our steps, until at last we reached the far side and collapsed onto soil again, gasping for breath. But the chanting did not fade. It only echoed stronger now, above us, below us, within us, like it had followed across the ridge, embedding itself in our bones. We staggered on, and soon the trail widened into another clearing. But this one was worse than all, before the ground here was covered in old wooden crosses, not upright but shattered, broken, strewn across the dirt, some splintered, others charred, all carved with the spirals that haunted every step, and on each cross hung remnants of cloth shredded stained stiff with age. And when I bent to look closer, I realized some of the cloth still clung to fragments of bone. Blackened and brittle, Jason whispered, "God, what the hell happened here?" But no prayer felt strong enough to answer, and before I could respond, a sound rose behind us. Footsteps, heavy, deliberate, echoing across the clearing. I spun quick, but nothing. Stood there, only the broken crosses, yet the sound came again, closer this time, and when I looked down, I saw prints forming in the dirt, prints deep, heavy, as though something massive walked toward us. Though no body cast them, only emptiness pressing. Down, Jason grabbed my arm, tugged me forward. We bolted through the clearing, dodging splintered wood, until the trail closed in again, trees tightening, suffocating the air, darker, thicker. Tinting now inside my skull so loud my teeth rattled, and when I covered my ears it did nothing, because the sound was not outside anymore. It was inside, crawling through my veins, beating in my pulseth, and through the choking dark. A faint light appeared ahead, flickering orange like fire. Jason shouted, "See! If there may be someone is here, maybe campfire, maybe answers," and he rushed faster, nearly dragging me. But my gut twisted hard, because the light swayed to steady to slow, not flame exactly, but lantern glow. And when we broke through the last wall, branches, we saw it sitting alone at the center of a hollow circle of dirt, a lantern burning. Though no one held it, its glass cracked, its flame unnatural, steady, unmoving. Beside the lantern lay a pack, torn open, shredded as though ripped by claws. Inside, spilled gear, clothes, a canteen, all coated with dark stains, dried black, but still glistening at the edges, and I recognized the brand, the patches stitched on the straps. It was Mark's, pack torn apart, abandoned, each and froze, eyes wide, his mouth working without words. And then from the trees around us came the sound of breathing. Not ours, heavier, deeper, dozens of breaths drawn in unison surrounding the hollow. But no shapes visible, only the shifting of branches, shadows leaning closer, and the lantern flame shivered once, though no wind blew, and without darkness swallowed us whole. When the lantern flame died, the hollow fell into a blackness so complete I could not even see my hand before my face, only the sound of breathing thick and heavy pressing from every side. Jason cursed under his breath, fumbling for his flashlight. But when he clicked it, nothing happened. The beam refused to cut the dark. The bulb glowed faint, then sputtered out as if the shadows themselves swallowed the light, and my chest tightened, because I realized the dark here was not absence of light. It was a living thing wrapping around us, suffocating our sight. Breaths grew closer, circling slower, dragging through the trees. Their rhythm uneven, some fast and shallow, some long and ragged, and my skin prickled as though dozens of unseen figures leaned close, exhaling against my neck. And when Jason grabbed my arm, I felt his hand shaking, his nails digging into my sleeve, his voice thin, whispering, "We need to move." But his words sounded muffled, like the dark itself absorbed them. We stumbled forward, blind, feet catching on roots, arms scraping against branches. I kept one hand outstretched, the other clinging to Jason as we pushed deeper, hoping the trail would open. But the trees seemed to twist with each step, closing tighter, roots rising like walls, forcing us to crawl, at times scraping our knees on stone. Thence now thundering inside my head, so loud my vision blurred, and I bit my lip. until blood filled my mouth just to keep from screaming. At last a faint glow appeared ahead. Not warm, not fire, but pale bluish seeping through cracks between trees. And Jason dragged me toward it desperate, and when we pushed through we found ourselves standing at the edge of a marsh, wide and silent, its waters black, its surface coated with a thin film that reflected the strange pale glow rising not from sky or stars, but from the water itself. Like the marsh breathed light from below, dozens of wooden posts jutted from the swamp, half submerged, slick with slime, each carved with spirals etched deep, and at the top of some posts hung shapes, bundles of cloth bound tight, the twine dripping slowly into the water. And when my eyes adjusted, I realized they were not bundles of cloth at all, but formed small, child-sized, their faces, their limbs bound stiff, their bodies swaying faintly, as if the marsh itself rocked them to sleep. And bile rose in my throat so sharp, I nearly doubled over. Jason clutched his head, muttering that it was impossible, no way this was real, his voice shaking, his breath shallow. But even as he denied it, the pale glow brightened, ripples spreading across the water, and shapes moved beneath the surface, long and pale, slithering too quick to follow, some brushing against the posts, causing the bound figures to sway harder, dripping darker fluid into the swamp until the water bubbled, as though something enormous stirred below. Backed away, but the ground behind us shifted, softening our boots, sinking ankle deep into mud that had not been there before, and the marsh seemed to expand, pushing closer, sucking at our feet. Jason pulled hard, dragging me free, and we ran along the edge of the swamp, searching for the trail again, the glow of the water chasing us brighter with each step, until at last we stumbled upon another sign nailed to a crooked post. Leaning at the edge of the marsh, the wood was soaked, warped, nearly rotted through, but the letters remained carved sharp and clear, reading simply the words, "Do not look down." And Jason muttered, "What the hell does that mean?" as he stepped past the sign onto a narrow boardwalk stretching over the swamp, its planks warped but solid enough to hold us. And though my gut screamed not to step onto it, the ground behind us kept sinking, pulling down into the black muck. So I followed wet. The boardwalk creaked with each step, but held steady, stretching far across the swamp toward another patch of trees, dim shapes in the distance. And I kept my eyes fixed forward, fighting the urge to glance at the waters below. But Jason looked once, only once, and I heard his breath catch, his steps falter. He gripped the railing, whispering, oh God, the first see them." When I begged him not to tell me what he saw, he just shook his head, eyes wide, unblinking, and his lips trembled as though the words themselves would kill him. If spoken aloud, the chanting swelled louder than ever, vibrating through the wood beneath us, filling the boards, making nails squeal in their holes. And the water surged, slamming against the posts, pale arms breaking through the surface, hands grasping, clawing, long fingers with no nails pulling at the wood, reaching for our ankles. And we ran as the boardwalk buckled behind us, planks snapping one by one, dragged down into the glowing black mirror, reached the far side. Just as the last stretch collapsed into the swamp behind us, the noise of cracking wood echoing like thunder, the chanting cutting off, all at once leaving a silence so sharp my ears rang. And when I dared to look back, there was no swamp, no post, no boardwalk, only dense trees pressed tight, as though nothing else had ever been there ages, and collapsed to his knees, panting, his eyes still glassy, his lips still moving silently, repeating something over and over, words too faint to hear, and I realized with dread he had not stopped looking down. He had seen something beneath that water, something that now lived inside his Mindy pulled him up, forcing him forward the trail, whining again though. Now the trees were marked with fresh carving spirals, still dripping with sap that looked like blood, and the earth trembled faint beneath their boots like a heartbeat pulsing deeper and deeper, and the air stank of iron and rot. That was when we saw light ahead again, flickering fire, this time not lantern, not swamp glow, but the red crackle of flames. We stumbled toward it, hoping for people, hoping for anything human. As we broke through the trees, we entered another clearing, this one lined with torches jammed into the ground, their flames steady though no wind blew each torch, marking a wide circle around a massive oak. Its trunk gnarled, its bark split open down the center, like a wound gaping and bleeding sap so dark it looked like tearing from that split in the tree. A soundboard, not chanting this time, but wailing screams rising high, sharp and endless, as though hundreds of voices trapped inside the wood howled to be freed. And Jason dropped to the ground, clutching his head, sobbing, while I stood frozen, unable to look away from the way the oak writhed its bark, flexing its wound, widening as though something inside clawed its way out. The oak split wider, with a sound like bones cracking, its bark peeling back in strips sticky with thick sap that dripped in long strands onto the ground and sizzled when it touched the soil. The torches circling the tree burned steady, their flames bending inward toward the trunk as if drawn by breath, and the screams pouring from within grew sharper, more desperate, echoing in my ribs until I felt them shake. Jason pressed his forehead to the dirt, clutching his ears, but I could still hear the words tumbling from his mouth, muttering in that same strange tongue we had heard in the chanting before, words that bent wrong in his throat but spilled out smooth as though they belonged to him. And I grabbed him, shaking, begging him to stop, but he only stared at me, wild-eyed, his lips moving faster, the screams in the oak rising with his voice. That split in the tree tore open wide enough that I saw something moving inside. Not roots, but shapes pressed against the dark surface, pale arms stretching out, clawing, pressing against the gap like drowning hands breaking water. With every push the wood bent outward, groaning like a door forced from its hinges. The smell pouring out, sharp, bitter, rotting, and sweet all at once, making my stomach seize it. Then one hand broke free, pale and thin, the too many joints bending wrong, its nails long and black, curling like hooks. It clawed the air, searching the torches, flickering, though their flames did not waver, and when the hand gripped the edge of the bark, it tore chunks free, pulling itself further out. Another hand following, then ahead, emerging smooth, pale, faceless, only a stretch of skin where eyes and mouth should have been, but still it tilted as if it saw us clearly, and when it moved, the screams from within the tree cut off all at once, leaving a silence so heavy it pressed a breath from my chest and gasped, dropping back. His muttering stopped, his eyes wide locked on the faceless head, and he whispered one word, whether though his voice trembled like he did not understand why he had said it. And the faceless thing turned its head at him, tilting further, before pulling itself fully from the oak. Its body long, thin, its joints crooked but strong, and as it stepped, Onto the soil, the torches bent low, their flames stretching toward its feet, bowing like worshippers see. Grabbed Jason, yanking him to his feet, screaming that we had to run, though my voice sounded muffled, as though trapped in my own skull, but he stumbled. With me, the two of us bolting through the far side of the clearing, while the faceless thing moved behind us, not fast, but steady its steps stretching long closing distance. Even as we ran, our legs burning the ground, trembling with each of its strides. The forest beyond shifted again, the trail winding, though now the trees stood further apart. Their trunks black, their branches brittle, snapping as we pushed past, and the air grew hot like fire. Though no flames burned around us, only the distant glow. Behind from the torches bending toward the oak, we had left the sound of wood splitting still echoing in my ears. Jason stumbled off in his breath, ragged, his eyes still glassy. I dragged him by his pack, urging him forward until at last the trees opened to another gully, this one deeper, its walls steep, mud slick with water trickling down. At the bottom sat a cabin, or what once had been a cabin, its roof collapsed, its door hanging. By one hinge the boards, gray with rot, yet smoke curled, faint from the broken chimney, as if a fire burned inside. I wanted to turn back, wanted to climb out and vanish into the woods, but the faceless thing moved at the ridge behind us, stepping slow but steady, and I knew we had no choice but to press on. So I pulled Jason down the slope, the mud sucking at our boots, nearly toppling us into the dark cabin doorway. There inside was thick with smoke, though no fire burned in the hearth, only ashes black and cold, yet the smoke kept curling from nowhere. The smell was sweet, choking, and when I waved it aside, I saw the walls carved floor to ceiling, with spirals every inch covered in them, layered over and over, until the wood blade sapped down the boards, forming dark streaks across the floor. Jason stopped in the center, his eyes wide, his lips trembling, and then he began muttering again. The same twisted words, though faster, stronger, and when I shook him, he shoved me back with strength. I did not expect his eyes burning now as though lit from within. He dropped to his knees, clawing at the floor, tearing at the spirals, until his nails split, bleeding, but he did not stop. I begged him, I shouted his name, but he only laughed, sharp and broken, though it was not his voice anymore. It was dozens, layered together, men, women, children, all spilling from his throat at once. And the cabin shook with the sound, the roof rattling, the walls groaning, the spirals seeming to pulse as though a leviathan. The dirt floor beneath Jason cracked wide, splitting open into a hole that yawned dark and deep, the chanting blasting up from it so loud. I dropped to my knees, clutching my head as blood trickled from my nose, and Jason slid willingly into the gap, his body jerking like hands dragged him down, though I saw nothing, only shadow swallowing him whole, his laughter fading into the depths. Crack sealed shut, the cabin falling silent, the smoke gone, the spirals dark and still again. I was left alone, my chest heaving, my ears ringing, my eyes burning. The tears, but in that silence the sound rose again, faint at first, then stronger, the steady rhythm of footsteps outside, circling the cabin, slow, deliberate, each step heavy enough to shake the boards. Dust falling from the rafters, and I knew before I even looked that the faceless thing had followed me here. Cabin walls trembled with every step that circled outside, dust drifting from the beams, and the faint streaks of sap running from the spirals on the wood began to throb faintly, as though veins pumped beneath them glowing faint red with each heavy footfall outside. I crouched in the dark corner, my back pressed to the wall. My breath caught shallow, my heart hammering in my throat, and every instinct screamed to stay silent. Though the sound of my pulse felt loud enough to betray meth, footsteps stopped right outside the broken door, the hinge squealing faintly as the rotted wood shifted, and I squeezed my eyes shut, praying the thing would pass. But the silence that followed was worse than the steps, because it meant it was waiting, listening, and the air in the cabin turned cold, sharp enough to sting my skin like needles. When I opened my eyes, I saw shadows shifting across the spiral-carved walls. Though no torch, no flame, no moonlight spilled inside, only the darkness alive. And moving door bent inward slowly, not kicked, not shoved, but pressed as though invisible hands eased it open, and then it creaked wide, and the faceless thing stepped into the cabin, ducking low to fit through its frame, its body stretching long, bones crooked, skin pale, stretched tight across its frame, its face smooth, featureless, tilting toward me. Though it had no eyes, I knew it saw me, because its head followed my every flinch, my every breath, and when it stepped inside, the spirals carved into the wood flared brighter, pulsing in rhythm. Its movements, it raised one long hand, fingers jointed wrong, bending backward and forward at once, and it pressed its palm to the wall. The spirals beneath glowing brighter, bleeding sap that dripped faster, pulling across the floor, running toward the center as though drawn by gravity, until a circle of dark liquid spread around my boots, and the smell rose metallic sharp, choking my throat. He scrambled back, pressing into the farthest corner, but the thing moved slow, deliberate, each step heavy yet soundless, until it loomed above me. And though its face was blank, I felt its smile, a pressure inside my skull twisting, until my teeth ached and my vision blurred, and I heard whispers not with my ears but in my mind, dozens of voices layered, spilling words in that same foreign tongue that Jason had spoken, words that clawed at my brain like hooks tearing through thought, until I wanted to claw at my own head to rip them out. He clenched. My fists pressed them against my temples, begging it to stop, but the voices only grew louder, sharper, until my vision widened out, my body convulsing against the dirt floor, and for a moment I felt myself falling deep into dark water, pulled by chains that wrapped around my chest, dragging me down into the pit Jason had vanished into. I saw his face beneath the water, pale lips moving, muttering words, though bubbles spilled out from his mouth, his eyes black, hollow, empty, as he reached for me, jerked away, gasping, choking on my own breath, and the faceless thing loomed closer, its head inches from mine. And then suddenly the voices cut off, silence crashing heavy in my skull, and the thing tilted its head once more before stepping back, slowly deliberate, retreating toward the broken door, its body bending crooked as it slipped outside, leaving the cabin trembling with the absence of sound, as though it carried all noise away. With Edie stayed frozen, afraid to move, afraid that shifting would draw it back, but the silence stretched until finally the faint sound of the forest returned. Creak of branches, the drip of sap, and I forced myself to stand, my legs trembling. The pool of sap at my boots thickening into dark tar that clung, sticky to my soles, as I stumbled toward the doorway outside. The clearing lay empty. No torches, no faceless figure, only the gully rising steep behind me. Though the air still carried the weight of its presence, pressing heavy on my chest, and I stumbled forward, desperate to escape, climbing the slope, hands clawing roots, until I pulled myself back to the higher trail, my lungs burning with every breath. The forest stretched endless before me, but the trail twisted still, and I pushed on, though my legs wanted to give way, my mind rattled by voices that had not left but lingered, faint whispering just beneath, thought urging me to step deeper, to follow the spirals carved into the bark that lined the path ahead, glowing faint red in the dark. He followed, because I had no choice. The forest pulled me, the air pressing me forward until the trail bent and opened again onto a sight that froze me in place. A wide valley spread below, shrouded in mist. At its center rose a structure, not cabin, not ruin, but a tower of stone, jagged black, climbing into the sky, like a clawed surface carved entirely in spirals, glowing faintly, pulsing in rhythm, like a heartbeat. Round its base burned hundreds of torches, their flames steady, their smoke rising into the mist like black veins, feeding the tower and faint in the wind. Though my ears ached from hearing it, I recognized the chanting again, not beneath the ground, not distant, but spilling clear from the valley, rising high from unseen throats surrounding that black tower, calling me by name, though no voice there was mine. Yet each syllable bent into my identity, dragging me down the slope toward the heart of Ravenbrook Trail. The slope carried me down, whether I wanted or not, my legs trembling, as though the ground pulled me forward. And every step I took, the chanting grew louder, until it became less like words and more like a vibration that rattled my ribs and hummed inside my skull. The spirals carved into every tree along the slope, glowing brighter, until the whole forest pulsed in red rhythm, guiding me toward the valley floor. The mist clung thick to my face, damp and cold, carrying with it the smell of iron, sharp like blood mixed with wet stone and decay. And though the torchlight burned steady at the valley floor, the fog never parted. It wrapped close and heavy until I reached the first line of flames, the smoke rising in streams that vanished into the black sky, and the chanting swelled clear and strong, surrounding me. But when I turned left or right, I saw no one. I stepped past the first ring of torches, and the valley ground changed, soft at first like mud, then sticky, clinging to my boots like tar. And when I knelt low to touch it, the substance stained my fingers black, thicker than pitch, yet pulsing faintly as though alive. And the moment it touched my skin, my head filled with screams, sharp jagged, cutting through the chanting. So I staggered back, wiping my hand on the grass, desperate to get rid of the stain. But it soaked and sinking beneath my skin, where the veins on my palm darkened faintly. I looked up at the black tower rising above me, its spirals winding upward endlessly, no beginning, no end. And I realized the chanting poured from within its walls, not from any throat outside. The sound carried through the stone, as though the structure itself lived, and I felt each note reverberate through the ground into my bones, until my body shook with rhythm, my heartbeat falling in sync. But the chant, unwilling shapes began to form in the mist, moving closer, circling the tower. At first faint shadows, then bodies, tall, thin, robed figures draped in fabric that clung wet to their frames, the cloth stitched with spirals glowing faint red, the same hue as the tower. Their faces hidden behind behind smooth masks carved from pale stone, featureless, yet somehow staring, each mask tilting toward me as they moved and circled around. The entire chanting in perfect unison, their voices one with the stone they froze, caught between running and collapsing, yet neither choice mine, because my body moved forward, pulled by the chant, and the robed figures parted as I approached, forming in, opening in their circle, not by stepping aside, but by fading as though mist swallowed them, their forms dissolving until I stood at the tower base. The stone black and slick, warm to the touch, though no heat came from the air around. ITA door split, open not with hinges, but with stone peeling itself away, spirals widening until a gap yawned dark and silent, and the chant grew louder, spilling from within, though I knew no tongue could carry such sound without breaking, and before I could resist, my legs carried me inside the stone, closing silently behind me. The interior spiraled upward, an endless stair carved into the stone walls, each step slick black pulsing, faintly like veins glowing red, and the chanting did not echo but lived inside. The air pressing against my ears and chest, forcing breath shallow and sharp, I climbed, unable to stop. Though my knees trembled and my hands scraped the wall, leaving blood behind that the stone drank, eagerly darkening, then fading as though differenti. Lost track of how many steps I climbed the spiral, endless time broken by only the sound of my breath and the chant, until at last I emerged into a vast chamber at the tower's heart, the ceiling high. Lost in shadow, the walls spiraled with carvings, glowing faint, and at the center stood a pit wide and bottomless, its edges marked with symbols pulsing in rhythm. Jason knelt at the pit's edge, his body trembling, his hands outstretched over the void, and his mouth moved though no sound came from his lips. Instead, the chant poured louder from the pit, rising through him, as though he were nothing but a vessel, his eyes black, his veins dark, running like tower across his neck and arms. When he turned to face me, I stumbled back, because though his mouth did not move, I heard his voice clear in my mind, saying, "You should not have followed. But it is too late now." The pit breathed air rushing up cold and damp, carrying the stink of rot and earth, and with it came shapes reaching long clawed, hands dragging across the stone rim, though no bodies rose. Only those endless hands clutching, pulling, scraping, as though something beneath wanted to climb reaches, and rose slowly to his feet, his head tilted back as if the pit whispered to him directly. His body shifted, skin stretching, muscles breaking, his frame bending wrong, until he stood taller than before, his limbs long and crooked, his jaw unhinged wide. Though still his voice whispered in my skull, "You cannot leave the trail, it does not. Let go, it follows you, it grows inside you." The spirals on the wall flared brighter, and the chanting hit a pitch that split my ears, and the pit widened, its edge crumbling stone, falling into black endless below, and I felt the ground beneath my boots shift, pulling me forward, dragging me closer to the edge, as Jason, or the thing he had become, spread his arms wide, beckoning me to join him, his eyes nothing but hollow spirals that spun faster and faster until my balance broke and I slid toward the pit. The stone at the pit's edge cracked beneath my boots, groaning like bones snapping. I dug my fingers into the glowing spiral marks, desperate to hold myself back from sliding into the dark, but the chant grew louder with every heartbeat, and The pull of the pit felt less like gravity and more like the trail itself. Wanted me down there, Jason's new shape towering above me, arms wide, his voice in my head telling me, "It is only hunger, it only wants you to feed." The black hands, clawing from below, scraped against the rim, again pulling themselves higher, scraping sparks against the stone with nails too long and too sharp. And the mist from the valley below rose through the pit, filling the chamber, choking my lungs until I gagged the air thick with rot and iron as though I were breathing the earth's blood. I felt the ground tremble each second stronger, shaking the walls, as though something immense stirred deep within. He clawed backward, my body trembling, knees scraping raw on the stone, my hands slippery with blood and black tar seeping from my veins. But the pit opened wider each moment, breaking the chamber stone, cracking, as if the tower itself were nothing but a shell for what lived beneath. And Jason, or the thing wearing him, leaned forward, his hollow spiral eyes spinning faster, drilling into me, until my skull screamed with pain. He pressed my palms to my ears, trying to block the chant. But the sound lived inside me now, thrumming with my heartbeat, echoing through my bones. And though I begged myself not to look down, my eyes dragged toward the pit center. What I saw was not shadow, but a mouth, an endless black maw lined with rows upon rows of jagged teeth stretching far into the abyss. And from between those teeth the hands reached, clawing for purchase. I realized the pit itself was alive, an ancient thing buried beneath the valley, waiting. Jason stepped closer, his elongated limbs bending wrong, his mouth splitting wider than his face should allow, and though nowhere moved, his whisper cut clear inside me, saying, "You cannot fight it, you are already claimed. Every step you took, every breath along this trail marked you. It is inside you now." The stone beneath my grip flaked, crumbling, dust slipping between my fingers, and my boots slid closer to the edge. The more breathing below, sucking at me, pulling stronger with every chant. I screamed, though the sound died, instantly swallowed by the roar of the pit, the chanting from the walls, the whisper in my head, until I felt myself tipping forward, balance gone. I felt the air rushed past me, freezing sharp, biting at my skin as I plunged deeper and deeper into the maw, the spirals on the walls of the pit glowing faint, red, spinning faster until they blurred together, forming endless tunnels rushing past me. And still the chant filled me, deafening, and I thought my ears would burst, my skull splitting open. Yet I kept falling farther than any pit should stretch, until the walls vanished into black and only the maw below remained, teeth glistening wet with blood that dripped upward, defying gravity, showering me in warm red mist. Something massive moved below, a shadow of impossible size, writhing, shifting its shape beyond what my eyes could hold. From the darkness its eyes opened to spirals vast as the valley, burning deep red, locking on me, pulling me farther down until my body felt like nothing, my veins burning with fire as though my blood turned to tar, my lungs screaming with each shallow breath. Hands closed around me, countless black arms rising from the dark, wrapping my body, pulling me deeper, claws scraping skin, tearing at clothes, holding me tight like prey. And as I thrashed useless, I felt them not just outside but inside, hands clawing through my chest, through my stomach, through my head, pulling me open from within until I no longer knew where my body ended. And theirs began. Chant inside me grew louder until my own voice joined, It unbidden my mouth open wide, words I did not know spilling from me, ancient syllables jagged, and wrong tasting of ash and iron, and I realized the trailhead had not lured me here to watch, but to join, to become part of the endless chant, part of the spiral that stretched beyond time and death itself. From below, the creature's maw opened wider, endless teeth grinding stone to dust. As it rose, its shadow filling every space, its spiraled eyes consuming me, and though I wanted to scream, only scent poured from my throat now, until I no longer knew if it was me falling, or if the trail itself had become me. When the maw closed over me, the world did not end, it reshaped the moment the teeth sealed. I was not crushed, instead I drifted in a blackness that pulsed like flesh, warm but alive. The walls of this place flexed with each breath of the creature. I realized I was inside its body, carried deeper through tunnels that writhed around me, as if they were veins or intestines, yet they did not digest me. They carried meth. Chant was louder now, filling every fiber of me, no longer outside, no longer in my head, but part of my blood itself. I could feel it pounding in rhythm, with a second heartbeat, not my own, but something vast, steady beneath me, like the drum of the earth. And with each pulse my veins burned brighter, until black tar spilled from them, shaping into symbols across my arms, glowing faint red spirals that shifted every time I blinked. Tunnel walls pressed tighter, pulsing veins, brushing my face, dripping with dark ichor that tasted of iron and ash, and every drop I swallowed seemed to stitch me tighter into the chant, until my own thoughts began slipping away, replaced with alien words, whispers not mine, telling me to keep moving deeper, to surrender the last piece of myself to the spirale. Stumbled forward, feet sinking into the floor, soft like flesh, squirming beneath each step, pushing me onward and ahead. In the dark, I saw other figures moving, slow bodies, broken, bent, stitched together with black tendrils, each of them whispering the chant in different tones, high, low, guttural, all blending into one endless song. They were hikers. I recognized them, faces from missing posters I had seen in town, eyes, empty spirals carved into their skin, each one a vessel hollow, but still walking, still feeding the chant on of them. Turned toward me, its jaw hanging loose, connected only by black threads. It spoke not in sound, but in my chest, vibrating through me, saying, "You are one of us now. You are not lost, you are the path." And as it stepped closer, I saw its chest cavity split wide open, revealing a spiral carved deep, where a heart should be spinning, faint red, pulling at me, until I swayed forward, nearly falling into Edie, forced my gaze away, clutching my chest where my own heart thundered against the spiral, burning beneath my skin. But the pull grew stronger every second, until I realized I was not just being consumed, I was becoming part of the creature itself, my blood, its blood. My thoughts, its chant tunnel widened into a chamber so vast I could not see the walls, only an endless field of flesh rising and falling with breath. At the center stood a towering figure, taller than any tree, its form shifting from human to beast. To shadow its face, a swirl of red spirals spinning endlessly. His arms stretched wide as if welcoming me home. Jason stood beneath it, or what had once been Jason, his body fused into the floor, black veins rooting him into the creature's flesh, his eyes hollow, his mouth chanting without pause. And when he lifted his head to me, his voice finally carried in sound again. saying you see now, you see it does not kill, it remakes, it feeds, and in turn you feed. And together we become the endless towering figure above, leaned down, its spiraled face hovering. So close I felt the pull stronger than anything before my skin peeling toward it. My thoughts unraveling in threads, and with every shred pulled free I saw flashes of places. Beyond this trail, other forests, other valleys, other trailheads across. Echo all with their own spirals, their own mouths hidden beneath the dirt. All feeding into the same endless chant truth clawed into me. This was not Ravenbrook alone. This was everywhere. The creature was not bound to this valley. It stretched. Beneath the land, a network of living trails, mouths waiting for footsteps. Each hiker marked, each breath counted, and every path led to the same moth chant rose higher, deafening my throat, joining without choice, and as I fell to my knees before towering spiral-faced figure, I felt my chest split open, my ribs parting without pain. And inside, where my heart had been, the spiral turned red, bright Olivian. Still the chant rose higher. The chant had swallowed me whole. The spiral inside my chest spun with such force. It tore away everything. Remembered my own name, my family, my past, the trailhead itself, all peeled away like paper, left in the rain, and in its place came the endless song, humming low, rattling my bones, bending me to its rhythm. My body was no longer mine. It was only a vessel, only a voice in the chant, towering spiral-faced figure. Bent lower, its breath washing over me thick as smoke, tasting of ash and copper. I felt my skin peel open like wet parchment, black threads pushing out, curling through the air, stitching me to the flesh floor, stitching me to the walls, stitching me to the others, until our bodies were one great tapestry of meat and bone and thread. Every voice fused into the chanty. Tried once to fight, clawing at the spiral glowing in my chest, but my fingers passed through my skin as though it was smoke. Inside the spiral turned faster, every beat a drum, every turn pulling me further, away from myself until my thoughts were no longer words. Only rhythm, only sound, only chant. Vast chamber quaked, the spiral-faced figure raising its arms. With its motion I saw beyond the flesh walls, cracks opening like windows showing other places, other forests, other trails. I saw the Elk Creek spur in Colorado. I saw the damp tunnels beneath Crater Lake. I saw Split Joe Ridge. I saw 100 paths across the country, each one pulsing with red spirals hidden from the world, each one feeding, each one waiting. And I knew then the truth: no trail was safe, no forest was untouched. The moss stretched everywhere, beneath the soil, beneath the roots, beneath the rivers. Every path led here, every hiker was marked the moment they stepped onto dirt. Walls shuddered with each chant, and suddenly I was outside again, standing at Ravenbrook Trailhead. The night air cold on my face, the sign creaking in the wind, the trees silent round me. For a moment I thought I had escaped. I thought maybe I had imagined it all, until I looked down at my hands and saw the faint red spirals glowing beneath my skin, pulsing in rhythm with something deeper than a heartbeat. A hiker passed me, walking into the trail without noticing me, his flashlight beam popping through the dark, and as he stepped past the sign, my mouth opened without my will. The chant poured out low, soft, carried by the trees, and though he did not hear it at first, I knew he would soon. I knew he would feel it in his chest. I knew he would not leave, because I was the trail now. I was the mouth. I was the spiral. and the chant would never end.